The courthouse smelled of old wood and broken dreams, the creaking floors, the whispering benches, the dust floating through thin shafts of light. All of it felt like the world itself was watching Emma Hartwell's life fall apart. She stood before Judge Harrison's tall bench, hands twisting in the fabric of her only decent dress. Outside, the wind rattled the old windows and carried the smell of cold rain from the Colorado hills. Judge Harrison adjusted his spectacles and looked down at her with the heavy weariness of a man who had seen too many lives ruined by bad luck and bad men. "Miss Emma," he said, his voice deep and final, "the law is clear. Your father's debts must be paid. Since he's passed, that debt now falls to you. And the court sees only two paths forward: debtor's prison or marriage to one of three men who've agreed to settle the debt in exchange for your hand." Emma's stomach turned. Her father's gambling had already cost them everything: their home, their name, and now it was about to cost her freedom. She lifted her chin, but her voice trembled. "I understand, Your Honor." Three men sat in the front row, waiting like buzzards on a fence post. The first, Cornelius Blackwood, was a heavy man in a silk vest too tight across his gut. His little eyes gleamed like coins, and when he smiled, it made Emma feel cold. Rumor said his last two wives had both died mysteriously, leaving him richer each time. The second, Harold Pembroke, was thin as a nail and just as sharp-looking. A banker. His pale hands twitched on his lap, and his tongue darted across his lips as he stared at her. Emma had seen his housekeeper once, with bruises that told their own story. And then there was the third man, Jake Morrison. He sat apart from the others, a shadow of a man carved from the mountain itself. Broad shoulders, rough leather jacket, dark hair falling in waves to his collar. His beard framed a face that looked both dangerous and lonely, like the wilderness had claimed him for its own. His eyes were storm gray, steady and unreadable. They called him the Devil of Devil's Peak, a hunter, a trapper, a man who had survived alone, where others froze to death or lost their minds. Some said he'd killed men. Others said he spoke to wolves. When their eyes met, Emma felt something strange, a pull deep inside her chest. Not fear, not exactly, but something that whispered, "If you must choose a man, choose the one who looks like he could break you, yet might never try." Judge Harrison's gavel came down hard. "You have until sundown to make your choice, Miss Hartwell. After that, the law will decide for you." The sound echoed like a coffin nail. When the men rose, Cornelius gave her a smile that made her skin crawl. Pembroke tipped his hat with a greasy kind of charm. But Jake Morrison only gave a single nod before walking out, quiet and sure. The smell of pine and smoke lingered in his wake. By the time the sun began to slide down the western sky, Emma's heart was a storm. She walked the dirt streets of Cedar Falls, every eye watching her, every whisper cutting through her resolve. "Poor Emma Hartwell," they said. "That foolish girl whose father gambled her life away." As dusk approached, her feet led her to the Silver Dollar Saloon. The sign creaked in the wind, the paint faded, but laughter and piano music drifted through the doors. She knew Jake would be there. Inside, smoke curled in the lamplight. Men paused mid-drink, watching her in surprise. A woman like her, young, proper, and desperate, did not belong in a place like this. The piano kept playing, slow and sad, and Emma found him in the corner, sitting alone with a half-empty bottle of whiskey. Jake didn't look up. "I was wondering if you'd come," he said, his deep voice rough as gravel. "Figured you'd pick one of the others. They've got more to offer. A roof, money, comfort." Emma walked closer, heart pounding. "Comfort and security," she said quietly. "Is that what you think I'm looking for?" Jake lifted his eyes and she felt their weight like fire. "I think you're looking for a way out of an impossible situation," he said. "Same as me." "You?" she asked, curious despite herself. He poured a second glass and pushed it toward her. "Loneliness," he said simply. It eats at a man after a while. The mountains are quiet, but they can turn on you if you've got no one to share the silence with. Emma hesitated, then took the glass. The whiskey burned her throat, but it steadied her nerves. "Why agree to this arrangement?" she asked softly. "You could have any woman who'd take you." Jake's jaw tightened. "Had one once. Fever took her 3 winters ago. Been living like a ghost ever since. Told myself I didn't need anyone, but I reckon a man can lie to himself only so long before the silence starts to feel like punishment." The honesty in his voice cut through her fear. Here was a man who'd buried love, who'd seen pain and didn't hide from it. "And what would you expect from me?" she asked. "Companionship," he said. "Someone to share the work, the quiet, the nights when the wind won't let you sleep. I won't promise love, Miss Hartwell, but I can promise respect. You'll never go hungry, never be cold, and no man will ever raise a hand to you while I'm breathing." Tears stung her eyes. For the first time since her father's death, someone had spoken to her like she was worth something. She stood, her voice trembling but sure. "Mr. Morrison," she said, "I believe we have an agreement to formalize." Jake rose, towering over her. "Jake," he corrected gently. "If we're to be married, best start with honesty." That evening, under the flickering courthouse lamps, Judge Harrison read the vows. The ceremony was short and without joy, but when Jake said, "I do," it wasn't out of duty. It sounded like a promise. When they stepped out into the twilight, the wind had grown colder. Emma looked at the rugged man beside her and felt both fear and strange peace. Jake helped her onto his wagon. "It's a hard ride to the cabin," he warned. 4 hours if the weather's kind." "I'm ready," Emma said quietly. But deep down, she wasn't sure she had ever been ready for anything in her life, until now. The moon was high when the wagon began to climb the mountain trail, and with every turn, Emma felt herself leaving her old world behind. She didn't know what waited in the wild silence ahead, but she knew one thing. She had chosen the man who looked like sin on a saddle. And for the first time in her life, that sin felt like salvation. The trail twisted higher into the Colorado mountains, a narrow line carved through thick pine and silver rock. The wagon creaked under its load as Jake Morrison guided the horses with the easy patience of a man who trusted the land more than people. The moonlight spilled across his shoulders, making him look like a figure cut from stone, strong, silent, and impossible to read. Emma sat beside him, hands tucked beneath her shawl, the cold biting through the fabric. She had thought she knew what quiet was, but this silence was something else. No gossiping townsfolk, no courtroom whispers, no sound but the horses' hooves and the lonely cry of a night bird somewhere far off. "How much farther?" she asked softly, her voice nearly swallowed by the wind. "Not long," Jake said. "Another mile or 2. Cabins near the hot spring. Keeps the ground warm, even when the snow's waist deep." Quote. Emma nodded, though she could barely see his face in the dim light. There was something steady in the way he spoke, a calm that soothed the storm still raging inside her. When they finally rounded the last bend, Emma caught her first glimpse of her new home. The cabin stood proud and solid in a small clearing, smoke curling lazily from the chimney. The logs were thick and cleanly cut, the kind that would keep out winter's worst. Lantern light glowed from the windows, soft and golden, like it was waiting for them. "It's beautiful," she breathed. Jake gave a faint smile. "Built it myself. Took 2 years. Every log's been through my hands." He helped her down, his hands rough but careful at her waist. For a moment, their eyes met, gray meeting hazel, and something passed between them, quiet and strong. Inside, the warmth hit her like a soft blanket. The scent of pine, sap, and smoke filled the air. A great stone fireplace took up one wall, and a sturdy wooden table sat in the center of the room. On the shelves were tin dishes, tools, and books that looked well read, despite the roughness of their owner. Jake set her carpet bags down by the hearth. "There's a room downstairs for you," he said, his tone gentle but distant. I'll sleep up in the loft till you're settled." Emma turned to him, startled by the thoughtfulness in that simple offer. "Thank you," she said quietly. Jake nodded. "You'll find everything you need. Linens are clean. If you need anything, just call out." He turned to leave, but she stopped him. "Jake?" He paused in the doorway, one hand braced against the frame. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. For a long time he said nothing. Then he turned, and in the glow of the firelight, she saw something raw in his face. "Because I remember what it's like to be afraid," he said. "And because I made a promise to myself once, if I ever had someone under my roof again, I'd treat them with the same care I wish someone had shown me." His words hung in the air long after he climbed the ladder to the loft. That night, Emma lay awake, staring at the flicker of firelight on the ceiling. She had expected fear, maybe tears. Instead, she felt a strange calm. This man, this stranger, had given her space, respect, and something she hadn't felt in a long time: safety. In the morning, the sound of splitting wood woke her. She dressed quickly and stepped out into the crisp mountain air. Jake was by the chopping block, bare-armed, muscles working as he swung the axe in a clean rhythm. Each strike echoed across the clearing. He glanced up when he saw her. "Morning," he said simply. "Morning," she replied, folding her arms against the chill. "Can I help?" He hesitated, then pointed toward the barn. Chickens could use feeding. Feeds in a burlap sack by the door. It wasn't glamorous work, but Emma threw herself into it. By the time she returned, her hands were cold, her dress dusted with straw, and there was a spark of pride in her chest. Jake handed her a steaming mug of coffee. "You did good," he said. "Most town women wouldn't touch a chicken, let alone feed one." Quote, "Maybe I'm not most women," Emma said, taking a careful sip. His eyes lingered on her face, then softened. "No," he said quietly, "you're not." The days that followed settled into rhythm. Mornings were spent tending animals, gathering water, or helping Jake with repairs around the homestead. Afternoons brought lessons: how to stack firewood so it stayed dry, how to bank the fire so it lasted through the night, how to read the clouds for storms. Jake was patient, his voice low and steady as he taught her the rhythm of mountain life. And Emma found herself listening to him in more ways than one. One afternoon, as they repaired a fence, she asked, "You ever get lonely up here?" Jake paused, hammer mid-swing. "Used to," he said. "After Mary died, the quiet near drove me mad. Thought I wanted solitude, but what I really wanted was peace. There's a difference." Emma watched him drive another nail. "And do you have peace now?" He looked at her, really looked at her, before answering. "Getting there." Their eyes met, and for the first time, Emma didn't look away. Something fragile and warm began to grow between them. Something that had nothing to do with obligation or debt. That evening, they ate by the fire. Jake told her stories of the mountains, the blizzards that could bury a cabin in a day, the time a cougar had stalked him for miles. She listened, fascinated, watching the play of light across his face. Later, when she retired to her room, she found herself smiling at the memory of his laugh. It was rare, deep and unexpected, like thunder rolling across distant peaks. But peace, she learned, never lasted long in the frontier. 3 days later, Emma woke to find Jake standing by the window, rifle in hand. His whole body was still, his expression cold. "What is it?" she whispered, her heart quickening. He didn't take his eyes from the clearing outside. "Riders," he said, "3 of them." Emma moved closer, peering past the curtain. 3 men sat on horseback near the tree line, their figures dark against the morning snow. They weren't moving, just watching. "Friends?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "No," Jake said flatly. "That's Caleb Reeves." The name sent a chill down her spine. She'd heard it in town. The mining baron who wanted the mountain for himself, the one who'd lost a gunfight to Jake years ago and never forgiven it. Jake's hand tightened on his rifle. "Stay inside, Emma. There's a shotgun in the closet and a pistol by the stove. If they come close, you lock the door and don't open it for anyone but me." "But—" "No arguments," he said, his tone firm but calm. "You're my wife now. That means your safety comes first." Emma's throat went dry. "Be careful," she whispered. Jake gave her a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Always am." She watched through the window as he stepped outside, rifle in hand, his breath rising in pale clouds against the cold. The three riders turned their horses as he approached, and the man in the middle, Caleb Reeves himself, laughed, though the sound didn't carry far. Jake called out, his voice steady. "You're on my land, Reeves. State your business or ride on." Emma's heart pounded so hard she could barely breathe. She couldn't hear Reeves's words, but she saw the sneer on his face, the way his hand brushed his revolver. Jake didn't flinch. Then, in an instant that stretched forever, Emma saw him move. The first shot cracked like thunder. One of Reeves's men fell from his horse, clutching his shoulder. The second shot came fast. The other outlaw screamed and tumbled into the snow. Reeves's hand shook as he drew his pistol. Jake stood like an oak in a storm, calm and deadly. "You've had your warning," he said. Reeves froze, fear flickering in his eyes. And then Emma did something she never thought she could. She stepped onto the porch. The shotgun braced in her trembling hands. "Mr. Reeves," she called, her voice sharp as ice. "My husband told you to leave. I suggest you listen." Reeves looked at her in shock. "You wouldn't dare." Emma leveled the gun. "Try me." For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then Reeves spat into the snow and turned his horse toward the trees. "This isn't over, Morrison," he shouted. Jake lowered his rifle. "It is for now," he said. When the riders disappeared into the forest, Emma realized she was shaking so hard she could barely breathe. Jake turned toward her, his face softening as he took the shotgun gently from her hands. "It's all right," he said quietly. "You did good, Emma. You stood your ground." Tears burned her eyes. "I was terrified." "Courage ain't the absence of fear," Jake said. "It's doing what's right, despite it." And as the wind swept down from the peaks, Emma realized something she hadn't before. She didn't just respect Jake Morrison anymore. She trusted him. And for the first time, she wanted him. Not out of duty, but out of choice. Snow began to fall that evening, soft at first, then heavy enough to blur the outline of the mountains. Jake built up the fire, the flames throwing golden light across the cabin walls while Emma sat quietly near the hearth, her hands still trembling from the morning's events. Neither spoke for a long time. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was thick, full of everything that hadn't yet been said. Jake finally broke it. "You were brave today." Quote, Emma looked up from the flames. "I was terrified." He nodded. "That's what makes it count. Bravery without fear is just foolishness. You had every reason to run, and you didn't." Her eyes stung. "You called me your family," she said softly. "When you told Reeves that, did you mean it?" Quote, Jake turned from the fire, his gray eyes steady. "Yeah," he said quietly, "I meant it." The words hit her harder than any bullet ever could. Family. No man had called her that since her father's death, and even he had never said it with that kind of certainty. Jake poured her a cup of coffee, his big hands steady, despite the storm raging outside. "Reeves won't stop," he said after a moment. "Men like him never do. He'll wait till the snow clears, bring more men next time." "But we'll be ready." Emma watched him, the way he spoke with calm assurance, the quiet strength in his movements. She realized that somewhere between the courthouse and this mountain cabin, her fear of him had turned into trust. "Jake," she said, her voice trembling, "I think I'm beginning to understand what you meant about things growing naturally between us." He looked at her for a long moment, saying nothing, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he set his cup down and came closer. "You sure you want to start this?" he asked quietly. "Once we cross that line, there's no going back." Emma rose, her heart hammering in her chest. "I don't want to go back," she whispered. "I want this. I want you." Jake's hand came up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His fingers were rough, but his touch was gentle. "You're not saying that because you feel safe, are you? Or because you think you owe me?" "I'm saying it because I've never felt more alive than I do when I'm with you," she said simply. For a heartbeat, The only sound was the crackle of the fire. Then Jake bent and kissed her. It wasn't the cautious, polite kiss from their wedding. It was deep and real, full of the hunger and tenderness they had both been trying to hide. Emma's breath caught as he pulled her close, his hands trembling slightly against her back. The storm howled outside, but inside the cabin the world had narrowed to the warmth of the fire and the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. When he finally drew back, his forehead rested against hers. "You sure?" he asked again. She nodded, her eyes glistening. "Yes." Jake lifted her easily into his arms and carried her toward the loft. The narrow stairs creaked beneath his boots, and the firelight flickered up the walls like it was blessing the union that was about to begin. "This was meant to be a nursery," Jake said softly as he set her down on the bed. "Mary, my first wife, she wanted to fill it with laughter. When she died, I couldn't come up here for months." Emma reached for his hand. "Maybe it's time it's filled with love again." He hesitated, pain and gratitude warring on his face. "She'd have liked you," he said quietly. The words broke something in Emma, in a good way. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a burden or a bargain. She felt chosen, wanted. What followed wasn't rushed or careless. Jake touched her with reverence, his hands learning her shape as though every scar and breath mattered. Emma's fear melted into trust, and trust became something stronger, something that felt like belonging. When it was over, she lay in his arms listening to his heartbeat, steady and real, and thought that maybe heaven wasn't above the clouds. It was here, in this small cabin surrounded by snow. Days turned into weeks. The snow came deep and fast that winter, sealing them in their mountain world. Life found its rhythm again. Jake chopped wood, hunted for fresh meat, and kept watch for signs of trouble. Emma cooked, mended clothes, and learned how to move through the silence of the wilderness without fear. They worked side by side, laughed by the fire, shared stories in the quiet hours of dawn. Each night, Jake's arm found her in sleep as naturally as the wind found the trees. Then, one morning, the sound of hooves shattered the peace. Jake was at the window before Emma had fully woken. "Riders," he said sharply. "4 this time." Quote. Emma's stomach clenched. "Reeves?" He nodded once. "Stay inside. Bar the door after me." "No," she said quickly, grabbing his arm. "Not this time. If he comes for our home, I stand with you." Jake hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but stay behind me." They stepped out together into the cold morning. Reeves and his men waited at the edge of the clearing, their horses stamping nervously in the snow. "Morning, Morrison," Reeves called, his voice full of false cheer. "Heard you've been busy. New wife, new life. Shame if something happened to it." Jake's rifle never wavered. "You brought this on yourself, Reeves. Turn around now, and you'll leave breathing." Reeves sneered. "Law's on my side this time. Got papers from Denver saying, this mountain belongs to my company. You're the squatter here." Jake's jaw tightened. "Papers don't change the truth." Reeves gestured to one of his men. "Show him." The man drew a revolver instead. The crack of gunfire echoed through the valley. Jake fired almost in the same breath, his bullet finding its mark. The man dropped into the snow. Chaos erupted. Shots, shouts, horses screaming. Emma didn't think. She grabbed the shotgun from the porch and fired at the second rider. The blast knocked him clean off his saddle. Reeves shouted something furious, but Jake was already moving, closing the distance with a speed that made him seem more beast than man. They met in the snow, the fight brutal and fast. Reeves swung his pistol, grazing Jake's shoulder. Jake caught his wrist, twisted hard, and sent the weapon flying. The next punch broke Reeves's jaw. "Stop!" Emma cried, running toward them as Reeves fell to his knees. "Jake, it's done!" Quote. Jake stood over his enemy, chest heaving, eyes cold as winter stone. For a long moment it seemed he might finish it. Then he dropped the rifle into the snow. "Get off my mountain," he said quietly, "and if you ever come back, I won't miss." Reeves staggered to his horse, blood on his chin, pride shattered. His men dragged him away. their retreating figures vanishing into the storm. When it was over, Emma ran to Jake, her hands trembling as she pressed them against the wound on his shoulder. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing," he said, wincing slightly. "Had worse." She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You scared me." Jake smiled faintly. "Thought you said you trusted me." "I do," she whispered. "That's why I was scared." He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "It's over now, Emma. We're safe." That night, as the storm raged outside, Emma sat by the fire while Jake slept, his arm bandaged and his face peaceful. She watched the flames and realized something simple and powerful. This was home, not because of the walls or the land, but because of the man beside her. In the morning, when the snow stopped and sunlight poured through the window, Jake woke to find Emma sitting near the fire, a cup of coffee waiting for him. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Emma smiled softly. "About how the judge thought he was saving me from prison," she said. "But he ended up giving me a life worth living." Quote. Jake reached for her hand. "You saved me too, Emma. You just don't know it yet." Outside, the world was white and silent. The mountains stood tall around them like ancient guardians, watching over the little cabin that now held something rare in such a harsh land: peace. Emma looked out at the endless snow and leaned her head against Jake's shoulder. "Do you think we'll be happy here?" she asked. Jake kissed the top of her head. "We already are." The judge had ordered her to marry a stranger, and she had chosen the man who looked like sin on a saddle. But in that wild mountain wilderness, Emma Hartwell had found what no law or decree could ever give: love born from respect, shaped by hardship, and bound by choice. And together, they would face whatever the mountain sent their way.